Welcome to the presentation How to use TOSD data. If you are new to the new statistical measurement system TOSD itself, you can also have a look at our introduction module that you can find on the TOSD website www.tosd.org. This presentation is split in 10 different modules. We have a first module on the introduction to TOSD.online, that is the data store. A second on development planning, then we look at SDG monitoring, we make an analysis of TOSD flows, we have a look at the balance of payment statistics that could be informed by TOSD, and then we look at the monitoring of certain global commitments. We have a module on development effectiveness, and we look at communication, policy formulation, and we have a final moment and we can have a summary of key points. The objective of this module is to present how TOSD data can be used for different purposes. After the seminar, you will be able to use the TOSD data visualization tool to understand how TOSD can be useful for specific information needs and to use TOSD data to these needs. So this first section introduced the data visualization tool itself. So here is an overview of the main anticipated data users for the TOSD data visualization tool. We have recipient countries, for example, central and line ministers or central banks, and then we have also civil society organizations, think tanks, academics, or data analysts. We have also provider countries, and also specific communities, like for example the blended finance communities or people working with the refugees or analysts that wants to analyze South-South cooperation. And of course we also have media and journalists. So what is TOSD online and how to use it? So TOSD online is the TOSD data visualization tool, and this tool allows easy access to the TOSD data in a powerful yet easy to use manner. Users can filter the data, produce alternate visualization, download charts, and export the activity level data with all available details. So how can we use this TOSD online? There are 7 steps that we can use, and we will see them in the next slides. But first, let's have a look at what are the data that are contained in the field. So the TOSD data fields are divided in 3 sets of fields. We have identification data, which includes the reporting year, the country, the provider, and so on. The basic data, which are the basic elements of the projects, that includes the recipient, the title, the description, the sectors, and so on. And the volume data, that includes the currency, the account, the amount committed, the amount disbursed, mobilized. Plus we have some other kind of special data that is about, for example, salary cost, concessionality, maturity, and so on. This is still volume data. This is the TOSD data visualization tool, where it is possible to have a quick and easy access to TOSD data. It is based on a set of filters and on a set of visualization by pillar, by countries, by sectors, by SDGs, and by recipient, of course. So it is possible in this in this visualization tool to select 1 or, for example, 2 countries, and then is it possible to select a group of countries. For example, here we have North African countries, and apply. We have the data for Pillar 1, for Pillar 2, and for mobilization. All this data can be seen, for example, by sector, and sector classification is here from the biggest to the lowest, and it can also be in 2 alternative formats, in the OECD sector classification format or in the ISIC classification format. Is it possible to make the charts in various types, for example, through a column chart? Or case it's better bar chart, by the way. Or is it possible to see by recipient? Here is by recipient. Is it possible also to see, to exclude some data? For example, we don't want to have a look at mobilization, or we just want to have a look at pillar 1, and that's it is simple just by clicking on these labels. We can export these charts, for example, through an image or through Excel, of course. So let's have a look at other kind of visualization. We reset and we go back on the first page. We can have a look at particular sectors, for example, let's say industry, mining and constructions. We apply the selection and we see how this changes, and of course have a look by recipient and by SDG. Of course we can have a look by SDG in this way. So in here we can see what are the SDGs for industry and mining, and we see that mostly are SDG goal 8 or goal 9. If we click on one of the SDGs, we have also the distribution by sub-target, and of course we also have the distinction if this is an SDG, if the SDG is indicated as a single SDG or as a part of multiple SDGs. And regarding the SDGs, it is also possible to select just, for example, one SDG and see what are the data. For example, here we look at SDG 5, we apply the selection, and we see, for example, that SDG 5, these are the sectors on SDG 5, or we can have the recipients on just SDG 5, and we can limit, for example, the recipient just to the top 10 recipient and export the data. Regarding the exports of the data, this is one of the important features of this TOSD online platform. It's necessary to go here on browse activities, then we have the possibility to also search for certain type of activities. For example, let's say here we can have a look at the specific data behind each activity, and is it possible to export the results to XLS, CSV and XML. So the TOSD.org main site that is shown in this slide is available, and there are documentation on what is TOSD on the International Task Force. There are pilot studies, events, resources, and the link data to the data visualization tool. This section is about how to use TOSD for development planning. We have some cases studies for development planning. For example, we can look at how to better understand the financing landscape for a given country and inform the integrated national financing frameworks, how to compare countries, and how to support donor coordination. We have we can find on TOSD detailed information for a given countries and identify possible financing gaps. All this can be done with the use of TOSD online data visualization platform. These slides present an example on how to understand the financing landscape of a sector in Burkina Faso. For this example, in a first step, we need to select pillars, all pillars, Burkina Faso as a recipient, all sectors and all years. And on this picture, we can see how to select the different elements and result of the search. The outcome is that the most important sector is the agriculture, forestry and fishing sector. For more details, it is possible to browse activities in the data visualization tools and then to export these activities in Excel, for example. Once we have the data in Excel, is it possible to use it to make more in-depth analysis, for example, with the help of pivot tables. We can also use those data to compare one country with another country. For example, this is important if we want to identify the potential providers intervening in another country that could support your country, or if you want to identify how financing packages are put together, for example, blended finance, and how specific instruments are used, for example, which sectors or guarantees are used. All this can also be done through the online data visualization platform. For example, in this case, we can select Chad, and we see what are the sectors that are supported in Chad. We can also then export this data in Excel, and we can have a look identifying what are the providers, what are that support Chad, and how the resources are spent. Is it possible to have pivot tables that can convene a great deal of information? We can also have a look at TOSD for the donor coordination. For example, we can understand, donors can understand what the other donors are doing just by looking at the TOSD data. Here, for example, we have the example of Vietnam, and we have a look at how the different SDGs are targeted in Vietnam. We can select all pillars, Vietnam as a recipient countries, all sectors, and all years. And we can use the data visualization platform to have a look at which sectors and which SDGs are more targeted. For example, here we have SDG 8 and 7, which are the most targeted by all donors, and the sectors which are more targeted are transport, energy, and industry. Also in this case, it is possible to export the data in Excel and have some pivot table in which we can have a look through the pivot table at the donors that are supporting most activities, in this example in Vietnam. For example, we can have a look that in this through this pivot table we can see that Canada, Denmark, EU institutions are the ones that support more of these projects in Vietnam, and then it would be possible, this information could be available, it could help improve coordination. TOSD can be an input, a critical input for the ENFFS, which are the Integrated National Financing Framework, that help mapping the landscape for financing sustainable development at the country level, and that can help laying out a financing strategy to implement targeted policies and reforms in order to reach the SDGs. This section shows how to use TOSD data for SDG monitoring. With TOSD, is it possible to compare priorities on SDGs? We can identify recipient countries' priorities for sustainable development and identify provider priorities for certain SDG goals and targets. All these can be done through the use of TOSD online data visualization platform. These slides make this example of Bangladesh. In this case, is it possible to identify the recipient country's priorities for sustainable development? For this, we can find that, for example, Bangladesh defined 39 plus 1 priority indicators, and these are shown on the right side of the slide. This question can be asked would be which SDG goals and targets providers support in Bangladesh. So to make we can go on the TOSD online data visualization tool. We can select Bangladesh, all sectors, all years, and see which are the SDG goals and targets which are more supported. And in this case, we can see that these are goal 9 and goal 11. Then, if we click on goal 9 and goal 11, is it possible to see which are the sub-targets that SDG providers support in Bangladesh. In this case, we can see that they are target 9.1 and 11.2. Is it possible then to compare what are the priorities of Bangladesh as envisaged by Bangladesh authorities and what are the TOSD data on support to Bangladesh? In this case, we see that Bangladesh has support as priorities 9.1 and 9.2, but also 11.2, and we have that in this case the funding of TOSD financing is really targeting the right priorities set by the Bangladesh authorities. This section is about an analysis, a more detailed analysis of TOSD flows that can only be achieved through Excel. We can see here three sets of analysis: an analysis of the blended finance landscape, an analysis of South-South cooperation activities, and an analysis of Pillar 2 expenditures. In TOSD, is it possible to find information about blended finance operation explicitly designed to contribute to sustainable development? Blended finance captured the strategic use of development finance for the mobilization of additional finance towards sustainable development. To analyze blended finance landscape, is it first necessary to select the relevant filters that include the pillars, the recipient countries, and the years that are of our interest. Then we need to browse activities and export results to analyze them in Excel. Once we have the Excel file that includes the selected TOSD data, we have to click on the data and then to the filter and then on the financing arrangement code, and then we have to select FA01. Since not all providers reported blended finance under the financing arrangement FA01, the users can also find information on blended finance packages by filtering activities that are reported with mobilized private finance. We can also click on amount mobilized, US$1000, and filter the values that do not equal to 0. We can also use South-South cooperation. We can also analyze South-South cooperation activities through TOSD and export these also in an Excel file. Here again, we have to select all the filters that are interested to us, and then browse activities and export the results in Excel. Once we have the Excel file, we can click on the Data tab and then Filter, and to have the South-South cooperation activities in TOSD, we have to select only the data that in the framework of collaboration has FC01. So one of the feature characteristics of TOSD is to have both Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 data. What are Pillar 2 data? We can use the information to analyze resources in support of international public goods and development enables. And for these kind of activities, there are specific eligibility criteria that are, for example, for such sectors like peace and security, climate change, and refugees and protected persons. So what are Pillar 2 expenditures? I mean, this is international public goods, development enablers, and combating global challenges that are not flows from one country to another country. For example, we have global and regional norm setting, or climate change mitigation, biodiversity, or macroeconomic and financial stability, peace and security, health, and also others. So these international public goods are key enablers of sustainable development for all, including TOSD eligible countries, and they are very important to track because they are able to valorize all aspects of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Pillar 2 expenditures can be analyzed in detail looking at the data exported in Excel. While after having exported the data that are of our interest and opened this in Excel, is it possible to identify providers, sectors and resources. In this case, it's necessary to filter the activities by TOSD pillar and then to have this kind of information sorted out by Excel. An example of TOSD Pillar 2 expenditure, for example, is the ITER project. This is an intergovernmental research and engineering project aimed at providing feasibility of nuclear fusion as a large-scale and carbon-free source of energy, based on the same principle that powers our sun and stars. This kind of project, for example, is supported by several countries, which are, for example, China, the European Union, India, Japan, Korea, Russia, and the United States. Another Pillar 2 expenditure is, for example, the International Land Coalition that has over 150 members organizations ranging from international organizations to research institutes, farmers organizations, that are working for secure land tenure for poor women and men through advocacy, dialogue, and capacity building. TOSD can be used also to support the balance of payment statistics, although of course there are some differences with the normal international development finance statistics. So how can this be done? So TOSD can be used as an extra source of information to verify in particular the orders of magnitude in the balance of payment statistics and fill certain data gaps. Here we have some potential mapping between TOSD and balance of payment components. We have loans in TOSD and financial accounts, other investment loans in balance of payments. We have some grants in both systems. We have project investment, which is in balance of payment are capital accounts, capital transfer and reserve assets. And we have, for example, also donor personnel, salary cost in TOSD, and these are recorded as secondary income in the current account of balance of payments. We have scholarship on both sides, and of course we have debt relief, debt forgiveness in TOSSD, and this is recorded in the capital and financial account of the balance of payment statistics. However, for example, things like in donor expenditures, like administrative cost, development awareness, are not included in the balance of payment statistics. So there are some differences, as we said, included in TOSD. We do not have cross-border transaction in balance of payment statistics that, however, are recorded in TOSD Pillar 2. There are some things that are included in balance of payment but not in TOSD. For example, military equipment or services, transfers by private individuals, for example, remittances, or transfers to private individuals, so official hospitality. And we have to say also that, of course, not all countries report to TOSSD, and those who report only include transactions with countries in the list of TOSSD eligible countries. So in this example, we can see how balance of payment statistics, so for example in the Philippines, could be complemented by TOSD data. Now we have that in BOP statistics, the central bank can have access to information on many kind of financial operation that involves forex, foreign exchanges, but does not have information about the operation that are carried by the private sector. So TOSSD data on private finance mobilized could help triangulate available information and inform more on cross-border private loans. This section presents how TOSSD data can be used for monitoring of global commitments. For example, in the Global Compact of Refugee, TOSSD is recognized as an official data source for 5 indicators of the GCR indicator framework. TOSD is a unique data source to collect data on the support of refugees in a systematic manner. Data on the support for refugees are only captured from reporters to the ODA system through ad hoc surveys so far. Additionally, TOSD can provide data on sustainable reintegration of refugees in the economy and culture of the in the economy and culture of the provider country. On this slide, is it possible to find a mapping of the indicators of the GCR indicator framework and the relevant TOSD components? For example, we have the indicator 1A that encompasses flows provided to or for the benefit of refugees and host communities in refugee hosting countries, and indicator 1B in donor countries. In TOSD, is it possible to find the respective information in modalities IO1 and IO3? Modalities IO3 covers support to refugees, protected persons in other countries of asylum. Modalities IO1 covers support to refugees, protected persons in the provider country up to 12 months of their stay, and modalities IO2 beyond the 12-month period. The indicator 2 of the GCR includes information on the number of donors providing resources to or for the benefit of refugees and those communities in refugee hosting countries. In this slide, which is a continuation of the previous, there is a mapping of GCR indicator framework and TOSD components. The indicator 3 is about proportion of resource provided to or of benefit of refugees in hosting communities, and this can be mapped to the modality IO3 and channel. And we have the indicator 4 of the GCR is about flows of resources provided, which correspond to modality IO4 in the TOSD framework, and indicators 5 of indicators 4.1.2 of the GCR that correspond to the modality IO4 and provider country. This section is about development effectiveness. TOSD data can help improve development effectiveness. In fact, it can be part of a renewed rationale for development effectiveness. A more comprehensive picture of the official flows and delivery channels delivered by a broader landscape of actors, including the private sector, is a basis for a better understanding of the effectiveness challenges and devising solutions for effective delivery at the country level. Development effectiveness has 4 principles. The first one is country ownership, and in this sense, TOSD can provide developing countries a wider view of development resources flows for their country and how these resources are aligned with the SDGs. A second principle is the focus on results, and this means that TOSD can help because it could provide a fuller list of development activities, and so a more overview, more important information to developing countries to make the link to the result of these activities. Furthermore, effectiveness is also about inclusive partnership, and in this domain, TOSD can provide a picture of a wide array of partnership modalities, including South-South and triangular cooperation, but also those involving the private sector and philanthropic foundation. Finally, what about transparency and mutual accountability? So a more comprehensive data on resource flows can promote transparency among all actors and can be a basis for coordination. It is also critical for ensuring evidence-based accountability and dialogue between actors and learning based on evidence. This section is about transparency, communication, and promotion. TOSD can be used for transparency and for a wide range of communication needs. In particular, it could improve transparency and accountability towards citizens. It could help the publication on websites, on discussion of parliaments. It could support communication and understanding about funding gaps. And it could help communication on how domestic expenditures contribute to sustainable development, for example, on climate change mitigation. Finally, we can see that TOSD can support providers to showcase their efforts towards sustainable development in developing countries, It could help in the preparation of sustainable development reports by both provider and recipient countries. This section is about policy formulation. Regarding policy formulation, we see that providers can use TOSD data for policy formulation in many areas. For example, in analyzing which are the recipients, and so better targeting, in monitoring the global commitments, for example, towards the least developed countries, in monitoring the SDG focus of their and partners and sectors, but also what are the financial instruments, modalities, channels of delivery, and what is their policy towards private finance mobilized, concessional and non-concessional means. This section is about the summary of key points. So, TOSD data are made public in the TOSD data visualization tool that is at the address tosd.online. This tool helps to get a first overview of the data. For further analysis, it's important to data to be exported to Excel and then further analyzed. TOSD data are useful for a variety of data users. For example, for recipient countries, for media, journalists, providers, CSOs, think tank, academics, and data analysts, and also for specific communities, for example, the people working on support to refugees. Finally, TOSD data can fill a variety of information needs, such as development planning, SDG monitoring, analysis of TOSD flows, SDG balance of payment statistics, monitoring of global commitments, and development effectiveness. Thank you.